So, The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion is like a 2004 memoir, kind of, but it's pretty rife with a lot of themes, namely regarding death, and particularly the death of her late husband, John Crawford Dunn, I believe, who's also a writer in his own right, too, like a very prolific. I think it was more sort of oriented towards sports, whereas Joan Didion was more towards like fiction and stuff. But she also did. She was. I'm still trying to kind of educate myself on her career, but she was famous for kind of around since far back as like Vietnam, I believe. Since she actually didn't pass away all too long ago, I think only a few years ago. So, but yeah, she lived to see the war and write about, like, you know, like Nixon administration and kind of that corruption. I think she saw like that kind of going down while it was happening. You know, she was abreast with a lot of these different kind of you know, like events that were happening. And yeah, so she ended up marrying John Dunn, and they had a very like fruitful, loving relationship. And he ends up dying of, I think it was like pneumonia, but it was like, I think it was like some kind of cancer involved as well. And it basically, you know, kind of sucked away his life from him very slowly, and she had to deal with the grief of that. And then she, The Year of Magical Thinking, the title stems from this kind of more of an, like, from anthropology, I believe, like this idea that if you think that something will turn out right, like, it reminded me a bit of like maybe a teasing, almost wry take on maybe like kind of new age thinking as well, like maybe a little bit of theosophy in the sense that like magical thinking is meant to overcome and make you kind of like positively, if you think positively enough about something, that somehow that thing will go away, or that thing that you desire so much, you know, if you manifest it, things will just kind of magically come. And we all know that. Anybody, like, I think even I know with my limited knowledge of the world, and that's not true. Like, it just, death happens, and it doesn't make any sense. So I think that's where it's coming from. But yeah, sure, her husband passes away, and the biggest thing is that the familiarity, like, they talked a lot, you know, there were, if they were on different tours, they might have, you know, been, you know, her husband might have been on the other side of the states, or even in a different country, and he'd still call her every single day, and they'd talk for hours, and she'd maybe send him a draft of her novel that she was working on, and it was a very, like, interesting back and forth that they had. And, yeah, and this idea that something so you're acquainted with, something so embedded, incured into your soul, like this partner, like you have this thing, like you always wake up next to that person in your bed, and all of a sudden it's gone. Like, even like I said, like the, you know, the long distance thing too, like, worked out with them too. So it was like she got like the perfect match pretty much. And even though obviously, you know, I guess, you know, I think she was kind of more intellectual to kind of realize that maybe things like words like kind of the perfect match, or things, or like, you know, the love of your life might not be kind of like in her camp. But I think she was like it didn't like dispose entirely of sentimentality. I think it's hard to escape these kind of like sentiments when with grief, and, you know, grieving a loved one and losing them. And this idea that I think this finding the balance too of like, how much should I grieve, like how much time should I spend mourning the loss of a loved one, like how much is the social kind of niceties, the customs and the rituals that we set up, you know, from funerals and all that, to the pictures, to you know, kind of throwbacks to their lives, and how compelling and changing, you know, like how much do we do that, or how much do we just kind of like let bygones be bygones and just move on from it. And I think this book she struggles with, she tries facing all those, and she's finding kind of a dearth in literature and stuff about like what it means to grieve. And she talks about, I think, Greek tragedians, and they actually, I had the right idea in like Antigone. I think she brings up, I think Aeschylus or Aeschylus, in the, yeah, if it's a Greek name, there's no way I'm going to get it right. But yeah, it's one of the Greek tragedies of facing, being thrust by the gods, which is a big thing, is like fate, like being thrust by the gods into this situation for no reason, and like nothing makes sense, and you're kind of, and that's kind of the brunt of a lot of Greek literature too, is this, the pain of existence, like Sisyphus rolling up a stone up a hill over and over again. Narcissus being, like cursed to look at his own, to fall in love with his own visage, like Pygmalion, creating a sculpture so, beautiful and formulaic that he falls in love with it, his own creation. And, there's a lot of irony. This is where, but not a lot, I think you're saying, like in modern literature, I think it was like lacking in that, and that she was trying to maybe rectify that with this book. And while I'm not at that age when death has been this, something I've quite worried about yet, it has affected me in ancillary ways too. Like in just, I have seen people, loved ones die. I have, I think I mentioned my father passed away earlier this year, and this process of remembrance and like how much is too much, like how much is it permissible to like look back and romanticize the past and be like, especially since he had Huntington's, it's like this vision of like what he was to, like this, is hard to kind of break. It's obscured, and it's skewed because it's skewed through a lens, because I don't actually, Huntington's affects your personality so much that there's a kind of a downfall in your faculties to articulate well, to be your best self, and it's like all kind of degrading into just kind of like tics and cholera, the dance. And I think Huntington's is almost like there's yes, it's a rare case, and maybe my case isn't emblematic of all people's cases, but there's also dementia, there's also Alzheimer's, and all kinds of different, Lou Gehrig's, and be it autoimmune diseases, or just a very common kinds of forms of dementia late in life. Like no matter what, I think we all deal with people losing their sense, of self. Like that's the thing. Like the self is like metastasized into, or it's it's hard to pin. It's hard to parse out who, like especially when you deal with like things like this image of, I've been playing around with in my novel, and I'm not sure if it's something that's already taken, but it might even be a literary trope. But this idea of like somebody who may be religious, and like their kind of superego kind of self is trying to, their id might, or maybe is like trying to keep above water and be maybe a pastor, maybe a religious leader, or some kind of preacher. And in dementia, you have the side that could be very obscene. Maybe maybe he takes off all his clothes, and then does something very obscene, or lewd, and that's not him really. Of course, we say, oh, that's not him, but there's this side. It's like a primal side to us, and I think once our neurology, there's so much we don't know about the mind that is absolutely out of this, like completely. I mean, it's said that like we don't know the depths, even touching the depths of our own, like oceans, like in the biology and life forms, new life forms, and permutations of species that we don't even know the name of yet. That's constantly rising. Likewise, it's actually even more so with the mind. Like there's so many avenues. It's what the psychoanalysts tried to, like Freud or Jung, Adler, Otto Rank maybe, or Ernest Becker too, all tried to figure out what why we tick, why we do things, why the core central thing of like the unconscious, for example. And a lot of people, they don't, myself included at times, even though a lot of times I do really like death, or not like, you know, I don't like, I like thinking about it in a sense, just because there's a finality to it. I think there's a there's like a I'm comfortable knowing, in a weird way. It's cathartic, but it's also morbid, obviously. It's disconcerting, yes, but also at the same time, if I understand that, okay, this is death, this is that's going to happen with everybody, we're all going to get to that stage, right? In some way or another, we're going to, if we're not going to grow old and go through these, you know, the process of losing that sense of self, going near the end, that thread of you know, a personality that we've so long kind of a persona like portrayed to the world, it's gonna be in a very undercutting, kind of anticlimactic, just absurd way, like arbitrary, getting ran over in the subway, getting or something as like silly as like Aeschylus, the tale that he's been a turtle dropped, an eagle dropped a turtle on his head, because that's the he mistook it for a freshwater rock or something. That's the kind of the funny kind of thing, but it's actually, it's not too far from the truth. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's I can't remember the name of the one Greek, Zeuxis, I think, Zeuxis, I think. He died from laughter. He was like, he wrote a joke that was so funny, just already giving me Monty Python vibes, the most funniest joke in the world. But he wrote a joke that was so funny that he died from laughter, and thus the tragic irony, tragic comedy, I guess. But yeah, I think it's in some ways or another. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. I was originally talking about Joan, Didion, and now I'm talking about my own personal kind of weird views on death. Well, maybe not weird, but just my own take on it, and I'm not really sure exactly if I know how I'm going to wrap this up, because now I'm talking for... I only intended to talk a few minutes, just because I didn't want to waste your guys' time, but I just felt like I had something else to say, but yeah, I guess this thing is like, the real kind of struggle is like rectifying one, is what's the word, reconciling oneself with death in a way that's not, that's why I'd like to do Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death sometime, because he talks about this a lot more in depth, but I'm kind of intimidated, but yeah, Joan Didion, I'll check, this was my only work I read so far. Off the top of my head, I can't think of other stuff that she's done yet, but I will try to dig it deeper into her various works. And yeah, thanks for watching. Keep you posted.